This is the Yokosuka MXY-7, also known as the Ohka. Translated into English, Okha means cherry blossom, but the Allies called it the Baka Bomb or idiot bomb. It housed a single pilot for a one-way mission. The fuselage was tubular and 6.07 meters long, with a diameter of just under 60 centimeters. At its core, it consisted of an aluminum frame. Longerons ran the entire length of the aircraft and supported the bulkheads. Aluminum sheets were attached over the aircraft's framework to form the outer skin. This gave the aircraft a very lightweight construction, apart from the warhead, which made up the majority of the weight. A one-piece nose fairing covered the warhead. The wingspan of the wings was 5.13 meters, and they had ailerons to control the roll movement. Balsa wood was applied over this to form the wing skin. From the photos we have seen, it looks as though this was attached with a self-tapping screw. The tail of the Ohka had two horizontal stabilizers. This design is known as a twin tail, which, in addition to providing more stability and control, also served as a counterweight to the heavy nose section with the warhead. The armor-piercing warhead weighed 1,200 kilograms, of which about 518 kilograms was explosive. The aircraft weighed a total of about 2,140 kilograms. The warhead was encased in steel to achieve the maximum possible armor-piercing effect against Allied ships. The bow warhead contained 5 fuses, 1 in the tip of the bomb and 4 in the base area. The nose fuse was armed by a spinner, which was able to rotate when the Okha was released. The other 4 fuses were armed by the pilot. Moving to the rear, the Okha was powered by 3 Type 4 Mark I Model 20 solid rocket motors. A solid rocket motor works by burning solid propellant to generate high-pressure and high-temperature gases, which are then expelled from a nozzle at the rear of the rocket to generate thrust. According to US scientists who analyzed the Okha, the chemical analysis of the propellant charge revealed 59.9% nitrocellulose, 26.9% nitroglycerin, and 6.1% mononitronaphthalene, 2.9% ethyl centralite, and 1.3% volatile components. The thrust of the motor was 588 pounds. In each of the 3 Okha engines were 6 propellant tubes. They were arranged in 3 groups of 2, effectively creating 3 long propellant tubes. The propellant charge was packed into the casing in a cylindrical shape, with a hole running through the center called the core. The motor was ignited by a small igniter attached to the end of the motor, furthest from the nozzle. When the igniter was fired, a very fast-burning material, which generated hot gases and particles, was expelled into the core of each of the 3 propellant tubes in the motor. Let's take a look inside the cockpit. First, there was a red switch used to arm 4 of the 5 fuses on the warhead. Then the rocket switch. This allowed the pilot to select which rocket motor was ignited when he pressed a button on the control stick. There was also a compass. An altimeter indicated the height above sea level and worked with an air pressure sensor. The airspeed indicator used a pitot tube located on the left wing to determine airspeed. The intercom switch was used to send and receive Morse code to the carrier Betty. There was also a turn and slip indicator that worked with a gimbal-mounted gyro. The turn and slip indicator was a flight instrument used to detect the attitude and movement of the aircraft in the horizontal plane. It indicated whether the aircraft was in a coordinated turn without slipping sideways. Then there was an inclinometer which showed the vertical flight angle. The inclinometer used in the Ohka was a Model 2, manufactured by Tokyo Koku Keiki Seisakusho. It differed from a standard inclinometer by a modified scale, where the 0 mark was closer to the top area to better indicate steeper dive angles. The circuit test switch activated the electrical systems of the aircraft. A red lamp indicated the activation of the circuit. Moving left and right, the control stick moved the ailerons on the wings, which controlled the roll movement of the aircraft. Pushing forward or pulling backward moved the elevator in the tail, thus controlling the pitch movement of the aircraft. The rudder control did not consist of pedals, but was simpler, namely a bar that rotated around its center. This moved the 2 rudder surfaces on the tail and controlled the yaw movement of the aircraft. The control stick also had a motor for igniting the rocket motor that was currently selected via the rocket switch. These simple, solid rocket motors could not be shut off after ignition. The burn time of the rockets was only 8 to 10 seconds, which meant a very short range. The rockets accelerated the Okha up to 640 kilometers per hour in level flight and 933 kilometers per hour in a dive. Contrary to most depictions of the Ohka in games or artwork, the engines were not designed to be ignited simultaneously. Instead, to maximize range, the pilot had a selector knob that he could turn. Subsequently, a button was pressed to ignite one rocket at a time. To get the Ohka into position, it was suspended under a Mitsubishi G4 M2E Betty bomber. The maximum range of the Ohka depended on the drop altitude. They could also be released at 10,000 feet, which gave a range of about 18 miles. About 50 miles from the target, after a formal farewell from the bomber's crew, the pilot crawled through the bomb bay grate and into the cockpit of the Ohka. First, the pilot strapped himself in. On the floor, in the 8 o'clock and 4 o'clock positions, there were rubber cords attached to the footbar, which were removed by the pilot. The rubber cords prevented the rudder from being activated while the Ohka was being carried by the Betty bomber. The pilot also removed a pair of thin metal rods attached to the control stick in the 10 o'clock and 2 o'clock positions. Cables and rods were always handed to an assistant in the bomber for safety reasons, because if left in the cockpit, they could jam the controls or flail around and injure the pilot. As a fifth safety measure, there was a combination of a metal rod with an eye hook attached to a spring on the control stick. It remained connected to prevent the pilot from violently pulling the control stick back upon release, which could cause the Ohka to pitch upwards and hit the Betty. The pilot then reached above his head, pulled a small wooden block until the canopy slid forward and locked into place. Then he switched the engines to standby and activated the fuse lever to arm the warhead. He took a padded earpiece. Once everything was ready, he reported into the mouthpiece, "Seibi, Junbi, Yoroshi." At the same time, he pressed the button on the instrument panel to key the Morse code for Sei, the abbreviation of his report. A flashing light and a buzzer gave him visual and acoustic confirmation of his Morse message. The Betty pilot pulled the lever, the hook detached from the suspension point, and the Ohka drifted away from the Betty, the point of no return. The flight of the Ohka began with a shallow, unpowered glide, reaching speeds of 370 to 450 kilometers per hour. A cotter pin had prevented it from turning while it was still attached to the carrier aircraft. The spinner could now move freely. The warhead was now fully armed. The pilot selected a rocket with a rotary switch and then pressed the button on the control stick to ignite it. Upon ignition, the pilot experienced immediate acceleration. If one rocket burned out, he selected the next one, and so on. Standard procedure was to save one rocket until the final part of the approach to an enemy ship. With the weight of the other two rockets already consumed, the Ohka reached its maximum speed with the final rocket. After the target on the enemy ship was acquired, the Ohka struck above the waterline. The wooden and steel structure immediately shattered, allowing the armor-piercing warhead to penetrate the ship's side before detonating inside. We used many sources to gather as much information as possible for this film. Please let us know in the comments where we have misrepresented facts. We look forward to as much exchange as possible about these films. Thank you very much.